Ever since the very first episodes of Monty Python's Flying Circus first aired on British TV back in 1969, a central pillar of their humour was how they drew attention to the intellectual shortcomings of the television medium itself. Bizarre editing, disjointed narratives, inappropriate music, bad special effects, fake sets. Monty Python took all of these common flaws of television content, which often go unnoticed by the viewer, and they exaggerated those flaws so that the audience can't miss them. This was arguably an intellectual effort to educate audiences, to make them more aware of how false and misleading much of their consumed television reality actually is. There are lots of examples of their television work that served as precursors to their first movie, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, but one that stands out for me is their comedy version of an Icelandic myth called Njál's Saga. In the Python version, the protagonist is supposed to be on an adventure in 1126 in Iceland, but finds himself blatantly in the English filming location of Malden in the 1970s, and his adventure is frequently interrupted by product placement type advertisements asking for business investment in Malden. The time displacement element, bouncing back and forth between the past and present, is also a comedic feature in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. If you haven't seen Monty Python's version of Njál's Saga, I recommend it. Very funny. It's the first episode of season 3. When it came time to make Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which I'll just call Grail so that I don't have to keep saying that full title again and again, the team had a new medium to work in, cinema. Just as their TV shows had used surreal exaggeration to deconstruct and lay bare the absurdity of television reality, their first movie, Grail, would do the same thing with the cinema medium in a way that to my knowledge hadn't been done before. The film was jointly directed by Terry Jones and Terry Gilliam. Neither of them had ever directed a movie before, but being that part of the movie's aim was to be intentionally absurd right down to the level of breaking directorial rules and editing rules, this likely worked to their advantage. Their film would turn near enough every aspect of the standard movie production formula on its head, and they even applied this to the trailer of the film, which begins with a similar panning shot to that used at the start of the Njál's Saga TV episode.
Once in a lifetime, there comes a motion picture which changes the whole history of motion pictures.
The trailer starts off with mistakes in the narration and the film being rewound while different narrators are brought in to try and do a better job.
Next.
Then a castle in the background collapses, revealing itself to be a model, which is also a joke in the actual movie.
Camelot! Camelot! Camelot!
It's only a model.
We don't get to find out if this one really is fake, but the one in the trailer is in the scene of King Arthur being lectured on politics by a rebellious peasant, and it looks quite convincing. There might even be a little nudge-nudge in the dialogue here about the castle being fake.
Who lives in that castle?
No one lives there.
Then who is your lord?
The trailer also equates itself with famous historical epic movies, and like with the trailers for those kinds of films, this one tries to big itself up as being far more important than it actually is. It sabotages that message with silly voices.
Once in a lifetime, there comes a motion picture which changes the whole history of motion pictures.
Ironically, in this case, the trailer claim is arguably true. Grail breaks the rules of cinema in ways that are normally unthinkable even to this day. And being that it was the first Monty Python movie to do this, it was a milestone cinema release. By breaking so many technical, aesthetic and artistic rules, Grail tears down the emotional and intellectual deception that characterises fiction movies across all genres, not just historical epics. And I'm not exaggerating the importance of this film here. Grail frequently appears in the top 10 among greatest comedies of all time. It's my personal favourite comedy ever, and this audience poll by Wanker placed it at number 1 as well. The great love of this movie, I believe, is directly tied in with how honest it is about the filmmaking process itself. The trailer announces in subtitles that the film is low budget. Has there ever been another movie trailer that did this? I can't think of one. The trailer also reenacts moments from the drama movie The Seventh Seal. I haven't watched The Seventh Seal, but the actual trailer for that movie does look unintentionally funny, at least by today's standards anyway. The Grailer also settles on an oriental voice for the narration, and that's probably an intended mockery of foreign historical epic movies too, like those of Akira Kurosawa, who is named in the trailer captions along with his movie The Seventh Samurai. But like with the Python's Njol's Saga TV episode being dominated by product placement, this trailer ends with an advert for a local restaurant. Quite funny, how can the same restaurant be outside every cinema the movie plays in? Okay, so with this anti-movie framing in mind, I'm going to take you through the movie itself, and a lot of the stuff you'll already have noticed in the movie anyway, but you may not have thought of it with this kind of perspective. I'm going to avoid a lot of the mocking of historical myths details in the film because I might be doing a separate video on that. Instead, this video will be primarily about how Monty Python and the Holy Grail is an anti-movie movie, how it dismantles the cinema medium itself by consistently breaking the formula. So, starting off the movie, black screen and silence with what looks like a joke company name, Python Monty Pictures Limited, with Monty in brackets. Why not just call it Monty Python Pictures? Well, it turns out that's the real production company name, and as we can see here, the company is still active on Companies House Records here in Britain. So the Python team even made a mockery of choosing a production company name. Now the movie title with an overdramatic start to the music, but contradicted by the Nordic looking subtitle at the bottom. I don't even think that's a real language. I tried Google translations of Swedish, Icelandic, German and so on, and I couldn't find anything remotely similar to this. So I think they've just made this written language up for the subtitles here. Plus the use of foreign subtitles for an English-speaking audience who are watching an English-speaking film. So already the cinematic rules are being broken all over the place. So now the dramatic music steps up the pace, and it's over-dramatic to the point of silliness, with more breaking of the rules of subtitles, such as also starring and then also starring, and then a locational product placement for holidays in Sweden in the subtitles. Remember, this was done in the TV episode with the Njol's Saga depiction, promoting investments and holidays in Malden. And like in that episode, this sequence is confusing the time frame of the movie by referring to the telephone system of the modern day. As the title sequence goes on, whoever is doing the subtext translations goes off on a tangent by telling a separate story of their own about mooses and dentists and cheap porn movies. And the music gets killed by someone switching off the record player. Revealing the 1970s technology of this medieval story. And basically what we get for the rest of these titles is various editors and producers and subtitlers fighting behind the scenes over what kind of film they're making. You can see that the original subtitler is somehow still slipping in references to mooses, long foreign names and even more ridiculous sideline stories. And then the titles are finished off by a Mexican editor throwing the medieval Britain context of the story even further to the winds. What I really like about all this is it draws attention to the simple fact that an editor can massively change a film to the way they want it to be. It's effectively a secondary form of film direction. Same thing with composers who often clash with producers and directors over what kind of score they want to make. These creative conflicts can seriously alter the final movie product for better or worse. And yes, people often get fired over these kinds of creative differences. When I made my first short film, a 35-minute piece, I let someone else have a crack at editing it and they did a half-baked job. So I scrapped their edit and redid the entire edit from scratch myself, and the result was a much better film, and even the original editor was very surprised and happy at the difference. That's how much of an impact editing can have. So we're not even into this movie yet, and the Pythons have absolutely smashed the standard introductory titles formula into oblivion, revealing the clashing ideas of different crew members and how movies are created. It's weird that we even have introductory movie titles at all if you come to think about it. Opening titles basically announces to the audience that what they're about to watch was staged and that the characters aren't real. whereas music albums don't contain the names of band members at the start of the music. Those credits are entirely separate, simply being placed in the physical packaging. So why not scrap intro titles from movies completely for a more immersive experience, and then just announce the creative team in the end credits? I think Jim Cameron's The Abyss just started off with the movie title and left everything else for the end credits, but I can't think of any other examples. But in Grail, some of the opening titles are of the detailed kind that are normally left for the ending of a movie, legal disclaimers for example. And there's a reference to complicated insurance forms in there too, which is a minefield obstacle in film production. As for these titles mocking the standard opening use of dramatic music, well, movie music, no matter how well it's done, is a form of emotional fakery that doesn't exist in real life. Grail draws attention to that fakery by having music that's overdramatic and culturally misplaced in turns. And now the time setting of the film is messed up by announcing a 93-2 AD setting or a 932 AD setting, I don't know which way you're supposed to say it. But King Arthur's legendary adventures are generally cited as having taken place centuries earlier than this. Not that he was even necessarily a real person. I mean, there's plenty of historians who say he never existed. Starting off with excessive fog, which is almost certainly smoke in terms of how it was filmed, the deception of sound editing is announced by the clippity-clop of horse hooves, only to reveal a minute later that it's a couple of half coconuts being banged together.
You're using coconuts.
What?
You've got 2 empty halves of coconut and you're banging them together.
And that's quite a convincing sound deception. I wonder if horse hoof sound effects have been done that way with coconuts before in traditional epic adventure movies. At the same time, the film is announcing its ultra-low budget by not having horses. And then a long dialogue sequence where guys on top of a castle criticise the coconut's plot hole. And Arthur tries to justify the plot hole but fails. So straight up, very first scene, the movie is sabotaging itself, announcing that it's all fake. Jumping ahead a couple of scenes to the Black Knight fight, this scene combines overdramatics and underdramatics. Underdramatics as in the smallest bridge ever going across a tiny stream that anyone could just jump over, so why do you need to cross a bridge? Overdramatics as in the fight takes the standard unrealism of movie action scenes and escalates it to the point of ridiculousness. Limbs being hacked off so easily is funny here, but it's a very common flaw in movie violence. Hacking off a person's head or a limb isn't that easy to do. There's a lot of tough muscle and bone in there, yet in a lot of movies, limbs and heads and so on just get chopped off like they're no tougher than paper mache. I mean, could you imagine taking a sword and trying to hack straight through in a single stroke, hack straight through, say, a raw Christmas turkey? You wouldn't be able to do it, would you? And of course the inhuman accuracy of action scene heroics is mocked here. As well as the typical ability of characters to fight on after receiving brutal injuries. Seriously, if you go watch most epic adventure action movies, especially historical hack and slash action movies, and you really pay attention to the details, they're not really much more realistic than what we see here. Onto the We've Got a Witch scene, and Bedivere gets knighted, and then we have the book of the film featuring Polaroid pictures of characters in the legend, even though Polaroid cameras never existed back in the Middle Ages. In fact, I don't think any kind of cameras existed back then. Now Arthur and his crew on their way to Castle Camelot, and the falseness of the location is pointed out.
Camelot. Camelot. Camelot.
It's only a model.
Shh.
Looking at the grassy slopes on the lower left of that castle there, it does look like a painted model, but the castle part is quite convincing. Now the movie switches genre to musical for the dance scene, and switching genres will happen again and again in this film. And during the dance they throw in a reference to Clark Gable as well, even though Clark Gable was a 20th century actor. Why would he be referenced in medieval England? Oh, and the brand name of Spam, the canned meat. I don't think that existed in medieval England either.
We dine well here in Camelot, we eat ham and jam and spam.
Next up, God appears with intentionally bad special effects. fitting with the ridiculousness of the plot point that God tells Arthur that he has to seek the Holy Grail, but he doesn't say why he has to seek it. It's another whopper plot hole. It's funny that a lot of epic stories and movies involve a quest to seek something silly like the Golden Fleece or the Ark of the Covenant or whatever, and along the way the reasons for seeking the treasured item fades into obscurity, and it's like, hey, we need to seek this sacred relic for whatever reason, but anyway, here's some action scene dramatics so you don't even need to think about that. So, leading into the French castle scene, over-dramatic music when all they're doing is walking. And it seems silly here, but it's actually very common in epic adventure movies, especially protagonists riding horses in westerns. You just see the hero riding a horse and he gets heroic music just for riding a horse. Then we have the locational logic of the story confused again.
Well, what are you then?
I'm French.
What are you doing in England?
Mind your own business.
Hiding in the forest, Arthur and friends build a Trojan rabbit, thus confusing the story with the Trojan War in Greece centuries earlier, which has got nothing to do with King Arthurian legend. But this film is mocking many historical myths, not just the King Arthur legend. The switching of a horse to a rabbit is a dramatic downplay, by intention of course, but before the rabbit is delivered, the French guy hears things totally outside of the story context. Jungle animal noises that shouldn't be heard in England, and electric power tools centuries before electricity was even invented. Oh, incidentally, by the way, we have the point here that lots of different characters in the story are played by the same Monty Python characters, who were also playing Arthur and his knights. This is kind of common in TV comedy, but it's rare in comedy movies, and when it is present, it has the effect of nudge nudge, this is just a staged movie. In scenes like this, a knight character, being played by the same actor who is doubling up as a new character, is conveniently missing from most of the shots and dialogue. So in this case, Lancelot, played by John Cleese, doesn't take part in the conversation because Cleese is playing the French guy on top of the castle. I mention this because it's a form of clever casting logistics that's easy to overlook. They have to work this out for every fucking scene of the movie, which actor is playing a knight and how they're going to double them up as an extra. And it also means that each Monty Python member has to be an everyman actor who can step into any acting role required of him. And the entire Python team were excellent actors, all of them very versatile. They can play old women, they can play old men, young men, they can do all different kinds of voices. All of them are fantastic actors. Next up, another of the film's frequent genre switches. We go from fiction film to documentary, but then the time frame gets mixed up again by having a knight charge in and kill the guy. So is this happening now or centuries ago? We also have another example of the film's frequent contrast between over-dramatics and under-dramatics. This guy is trying to big up the Arthur story as something monumental, and then his own death is met with the silence of the forest. And if you think about it, people slaying each other with swords in the forest would typically be met with that kind of forest silence anyway. Reality doesn't tend to give people dramatic endings. There's something else interesting here is that by casting two actors who are not part of the Python crew and having this guy look like a genuine historian, the night attack comes as even more of a surprise. It's also funny that the subtitle introducing him, which would normally be done in post-production, actually appears in the footage in advance of the disastrous take. So I love how the Pythons can shift reality on multiple levels in such a short space, like the film is editing itself as it goes along. And we also have the low-budget mockery element again. We would expect a crew of people to be filming this guy and to all run into his aid, but it's just his wife and no one else. Next up, the tale of Sir Robin. Establishing shot zooms into the forested high slopes of a cliff, but once we get into the scene they're in a flat area, not on a slope. I love the mismatch of terrain there. Easy to miss in the DVD copy of the film, but much more noticeable in HD, are the multiple signs warning the protagonist away from impending danger. How many times have we watched protagonists in movies walk stupidly into dangerous situations that we can see coming a mile away? Hilarious bad special effects of a three-headed knight who doesn't take a single step because the low-budget effects won't allow it. Having monsters be immobile is common in old practical effects movies as a standard giveaway of the fakery involved. I mean, think of Jabba the Hutt. I mean, he was actually an excellent puppet monster in Return of the Jedi, but we never got to see him move position at all. Oh, and I love the giant belt on these guys too. Onto the story of Sir Galahad. A genre switch to horror now, with wolves howling and sinister music and excessive fog. Climbing a hill for no reason, and he just happens to stumble across a castle. And this thing about characters randomly or conveniently showing up in the required plot context in movies is quite common. This turns out to be the castle anthrax, even though the anthrax disease wasn't discovered until the 1800s. Another genre switch now from horror to porn, as Galahad is offered a mass orgy with young women, and then the temptress blatantly breaks the fourth wall and talks about the scene not being cut out of the movie, even though she shouldn't know that while actually filming the take.
Person and must pay the penalty. Do you think the scene should have been cut? We were so worried when the boys were writing it, but now we're glad. If
that's not enough of a head spinner, the audience is presented as the rest of the characters from other scenes, including scenes that haven't even happened yet. So by casting the rest of the film's characters as the audience, does that include us? I don't know. And how many times have we seen adventure epics with drawn-out dialogue scenes and wanted to shout at the screen,
Joe, get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Get on with it!
when God intervenes, you know it's dragging on. The typical example I hate in historical epics, or any other movie, is when characters give a long speech while they're dying, like in Lord of the Rings. I tend to blurt out at the screen, "Hurry up and fucking die!" At the end of this scene, something else that breaks the time setting is modern day swearing.
Shit!
I wonder when the word shit was first used.
Oh! Stop saying the word!
There is an extensive Wikipedia page on it if you want to bother going reading about that. And now references to scene numbers are brought in, sabotaging the narrative even further.
On to scene 24, which is a smashing scene with some lovely acting.
While the narrator veers off into talking about stuff that has nothing to do with the plot, so he gets executed in the recording room.
In which Arthur discovers a vital clue, in which there aren't any swallows, but I think you can hear a stop.
And we get more reality-shifting mind games here. An old seer tells Arthur and Bedivere to go to the Bridge of Death, but it turns out that was just a dream, except later on it will be the old seer who is at the Bridge of Death, and that makes no plot sense at all. And then suddenly we're back in horror movie territory with overdramatic music and facial reactions. And then, the knights who say the N-word.
Who are you?
We are the knights who say...
No.
Like with the three-headed knight, the impossibly tall knight here never walks around, thus revealing the special effects limitation. And he gives them a stupid mission that makes about as much sense as the Grail mission itself.
We want... a shrubbery!
This is actually common in adventure stories and adventure movies. A lead hero character needs information or help, so he's given a stupid side quest that makes no sense. The one that always cracks me up is when the hero completes the side mission and delivers the requested item, but then the person who sent them on the side mission says, "Thanks, now here you go, you can keep the item." And that always comes off to me like a colossal joke against the hero. Now another of the film's crude drawings, and there's been plenty of them so far, but this time the drawing process is shown and is interrupted. but the guy doing the drawing is a drawn animation himself. That's a bit of a head scratcher. So out he goes to tell the clouds and the sun to get lost because they're bouncing about ruined his drawing. And for me, this draws attention to the problem of the British weather. Not only is it something that super rich snobs like this guy can't control, but it typically interferes with the filmmaking process too. And there are lots of scenes in this film that are shot under typically dreary weather conditions. Did the crew shoot in such poor light conditions deliberately as a commentary on British weather? Or did they lack the budget to delay shooting days until the weather was much more suitable? An example of this kind of problem in filmmaking is something I covered many years ago in a video on the movie Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior. The fantastic end chase sequence in that film, the huge car chase, if you pay attention to the weather, the time of day is all over the place, the clouds are all over the place. 1 minute it's sunny, the next minute it's cloudy. Next 1 minute it's the sun is going down, the next minute the sun is way up in the sky. That's a great example of how weather conditions severely limit the realism of movies, and how when you're stuck on a low budget you can't hang around for days waiting for the right weather conditions. Now my favourite of the silly side adventures in this film, the tale of Sir Lancelot rescuing the hippie prince in the tower. This time characters are able to edit the musical score while they're acting in the scene.
I'd rather just sing.
Stop that, stop that. You're not going into a song while I'm here.
No, listen.
I like this because it draws attention to the contradictory nature of movie music itself. The fact that we, the audience, can hear the score, but apparently the characters in the movie can't hear it. The idiocy of incidental characters and extras in adventure stories is mocked here by two guards being unable to understand and carry out basic orders. And then the prince can write a help note and fire it out the window right under their noses without them realising what he's doing. You know, we have the classic examples like the stormtroopers in Star Wars being extremely stupid and not being able to shoot straight and stuff like that. And this happens across lots and lots of action movies. So Lancelot receives the note and tries to over-dramatise its importance, but his baggage carrier spoils the drama by not dying.
No, I feel fine, actually.
Farewell, sweet Concord.
And his name is Concord, by the way, but to my knowledge the word didn't exist until modern times. Onto the castle attack, and oh boy does this mock the standard hack and slash adventure movie. First up, in the very difficult task of launching a one-man surprise attack on a guarded castle, Lancelot is aided by the time-distorting miracle of film editing. Now he engages in mass murder, with the horror being masked over by heroic music, and action movies are full of examples of this. And in classic action movie style, the enemy guards are so inept, they just stand there while the slaughter goes on and waiting to be slaughtered themselves. So in comes Daddy to moan about the slaughter.
Did you kill all those guards?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
They cost £50 each.
Well, I'm awfully sorry.
Now I was going to say that I don't think the pound sterling currency existed back in medieval times, but upon reading up about it I was proven wrong. Okay, so back to Arthur himself on a stupid mission to find a shrubbery, even though they've been walking through forests full of them, and the shrubbery trader just happens to show up and move the plot forward, as typically happens in adventure movies.
I am a shrubber. My name is Roger the Shrubber. I arrange, design and sell shrubberies.
Assistance tends to conveniently arrive at just the right moment in every scene. When they go back to the Knights of the N-word, they discover that the Knights are afraid of the word it, even though the word it was spoken when the Knights gave them the shrubbery mission.
Well, what is it you want?
And the main Knight even says the word it himself here.
May we go now?
It is a good shrubbery.
I don't know, are the Pythons just mocking the ridiculousness of movie dialogue in general here? Now more cartoon silliness with stupid monsters, and then my favourite moment of over-the-top music dramatising a scene where nothing dramatic is happening. And it is actually a marvellous piece of adventure music in its own right. I mean, you could imagine that music actually being used plausibly in a proper epic adventure movie. The next lunatic on their trail is Tim the Enchanter. Lots of fireworks and missiles and shouting for nothing more than a "sure, I can lead you to the Grail" plot point. John Cleese gives a great little speech here, even spitting on Arthur. I do like that every now and then in this film the Python team show that they can actually do powerful dramatics when they want to do it. It's almost like a disclaimer. Hey, look folks, all this silliness isn't simply because we don't know how to make a great movie. We do know how. I mean, go watch Time Bandits, written by Michael Palin and Terry Gilliam. That's a fantastic adventure movie, very creative and marvellously directed by Gilliam, with several of the Python actors making bit part appearances. I love this next shot of Arthur and friends walking out from behind a close-up skull made to look like a huge one. We can even hear the skull breathing. Death awaits. Although it seems that there's a bit of a joke here in that they're coming out of the skull's nose. Yeah. Onto the killer rabbit scene, and the tiny size of the beast saves on special effects, but the fluffy funniness and the pinkish blood allows for full-on gore. So, ironically, the horror of real medieval battles is present in the level of gore. So now they get the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch, even though pinpull grenades didn't exist in medieval times. In standard action movie mockery, the thrown grenade just happens to bounce straight onto the rabbit. At the place where Arthur encountered the knights who say "ne" should be miles away, and yet the police hear the grenade as if it's just a few hundred meters away. So, the geography of the film makes no sense at all, as it often doesn't in adventure movies. Into the cave of Caer Bannog, and the team are attacked by the legendary Black Beast, which isn't even black. So now we get live film footage mixing with animation to save on special effects, with the special effects artist dying mid-scene, meaning no more animations for the rest of the film. It's surprising how many films end up being so different when creative crew members die during production. It does happen, and it can make the difference between a film being great or terrible. Onto the Bridge of Death, and now even Arthur is making reference to the script that he is starring in.
Look! There's the old man from scene 24. What is he doing here?
The 3 questions in order to cross plot points is utterly stupid, and yet it's directed with so much drama. As is usually the case with adventure films, the hero succeeds where others fail, but largely on account of blind luck.
What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
What do you mean? An African or European swallow?
Huh? I don't know that.
And I love the intermission when they're crossing the bridge. This is probably my favourite little moment in the whole movie. There used to be really silly intermission screens like that in some movie theatres, but this is a fake one only lasting for a few seconds. So when the Grail movie was originally on the cinemas in the 1970s, I wonder how many people stood up thinking that that was a real intermission, and then they were laughed back into their seats by the rest of the audience. But I also love the music and colour contrast going against the overdramatics of the scene itself, and the extra nudge reminding us how unreal the cinematic experience is. Now, the cops were chasing them on their trail earlier, but somehow the cops have made it to the other side of the Bridge of Death in advance to arrest Sir Lancelot. So there must be tarmac roads in these landscapes somewhere, or is it just intentional geographical impossibility? And hey, wouldn't it have been funny if Arthur and his crew had walked across a tarmac road on their travels at some point? Just a little random moment in one of the scenes, a little hidden joke for people to pick up on. Near the end of the film now, and for no reason at all, angels are heard singing, and a dragon-headed boat magically arrives to deliver Arthur and Bedivere to the supposed resting place of the almighty Holy Grail. Why this happens now at this point in the story instead of earlier is a total mystery. However, this little scene is awesome in a straight dramatic sense. The music is mega epic. and the fogginess looks fantastic. So does the boat too, but it's all a deception, as movies always are. Just like life itself, our best efforts to achieve our dreams aren't always met with glorious success. They're certainly hardly ever met with glorious music. And more often than not, we fail. Often we make a fool of ourselves, or others make fools of us when we fail to achieve the things we try to pursue. And this movie takes the disappointing ending to the extreme by having a bucket of what I assume to be excretions poured onto the hero. So off they go, humiliated, and somehow manage to walk straight across the lake in a few seconds without the need for a boat. As often happens in hack and slash adventure movies, the protagonist suddenly whips up a last-minute army out of nowhere. The build-up here with the music and costumes and smoke is pretty awesome. This would be a great moment in a proper medieval adventure movie, which I think the Pythons were very capable of doing given a decent budget and the desire to actually make one. Instead, the utter falseness of the adventure movie narrative and the time setting is destroyed by police arriving to arrest Arthur and Bedivere, like they were just lunatics running around in the forest. But we're still filming, so the footage is turned from fictional takes into a documentary recording. That is, until a cop grabs the camera and permanently kills the movie. The narrative is so utterly destroyed at this moment that the film has no end credits at all, just the circus-like intermission music that we heard on the bridge scene. I don't think I've ever seen another movie that had no end credits whatsoever, and I wonder how many people, when they were watching this movie in the cinema, remained sat there in their seats thinking that because there are no end credits that the film was somehow going to start up again. Imagine them sitting right through this annoying piece of music only to have the lights in the cinema turn on, suggesting that, you know, time to get out of here. So there you go. Monty Python and the Holy Grail is a milestone cinema experience. It's the ultimate anti-movie movie. The Pythons took their television perfected brand of sabotage the medium by amplifying its technical and intellectual deceptive qualities to the point of obvious absurdity, and they applied it to the cinema medium. They made other great comedy movies, but for me, Grail did the first and best job of amplifying and thus sabotaging the feature film illusion. I can't think of any other movie that so wholeheartedly breaks so many rules of the medium. The Python team were much smarter than they were given credit. They were like professors, but they were communicating through comedy instead of published academic papers. And they had guts. They really went against the grain with these works of art hidden under the guise of, oh, it's just a bit of outrageous fun. But an even greater aspect of this movie is that it achieves the monumental feat of